everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This week, we are joined by the legendary Evan Haskell from Synchro Nest. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bart.
Pleasure to have you on. Pleasure to hear your story. Pleasure to have you involved in the industry. This week, we're going to be talking to everyone about how they can increase their revenue by 20% in their business. I love this title because it's poignant. It really says what it's going to do on the tin. And what it does, Evan, is it puts a bit of pressure on you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Evan, how's it going out there? Whereabouts you living? Whereabouts is the business? And tell us a little bit of a background of you and your journey.
Sure. So home base for me is in Los Angeles, California. I spend a little bit of time in what's called Carlsbad, California, so close to San Diego. And then I spend about 10% of the year in Costa Rica, where I'm building a property. So those are my three favorite places in the world. Born and raised, like I said, in Los Angeles, pretty poor high school student, but somehow got my stuff together when I graduated and went to USC, which is a school here in LA. I ended up going to business school, and I got my start in the short-term rental business shortly after graduation by leasing apartments in downtown LA and putting them on Airbnb back in 2012. I wasn't living in those apartments, but I saw a great opportunity to build a scalable business because I believed in Airbnb. And over the next decade, I scaled a company called Urban Flat in the Silicon Valley to over 200 listings, all company leased and owned. And that brand was the largest in the Silicon Valley, housing mostly business travelers and pro athletes. And then COVID came along and we had so many eggs in the Silicon Valley basket. I lost everything that I built, but I was left with experiences and failures and lessons that led me to the next chapter of my journey. And I love this industry on the short-term rental side, hotel side, boutique hotels, and very passionate about this industry.
Yeah, look, it's fascinating because you started your business back kind of in the infancy of Airbnb and short-term rentals. And it was back in the day when people would just rent out a room, but you kind of saw a bit of vision. You're like, hold on a second, there'll be demand for whole houses and apartments and that sort of thing. It's interesting as well because back in those days, what you do is called arbitrage or rent to lease, or the other way around. But it depends on where you are in the world. Mm-hmm. I think what I would say is I'd love to have you back at some stage to have a chat about building that sort of a brand and how you engage in the corporate world and understanding your market and what drives that demand. And I think we'll probably cover some of those ideas in the episode itself. But now you've moved into looking at a really high value part of the short-term rental business, because I think that being able to scale and grow a business and that sort of thing, there's a lot of resources, information out there, but really learning how to optimize it and really get the most out of it is an area that's got more and more information coming into it, but an area that's also maybe not that well understood by everybody. And I think that's where we can add value, you as a business owner, right, with Synchro Nest, but also as a podcast going, hey, this is the kind of stuff that we do and things that you want to look at.
Yeah.
So you'd agree with me that one of the biggest opportunities is revenue optimization rather than scaling in itself?
I think that they go hand in hand, but you find a lot of property managers, individual owners that are so focused on their next door that they kind of forget to look at what's right in front of them. So optimizing what you have in front of you is a smart move. And, when neighbors poke around at your calendar and see that they're full and they're not, a lot of times that actually leads to the growth. So you don't need to spend much money on marketing. You need to dial in what you have, whether you have one listing or 100. And yeah, I believe that that's an amazing opportunity. This industry has matured a lot. since I started it back or got into it in 2012. We're sitting here in what, 2026? Was it 2026? I literally had to check. That's pretty dark. But
Yes, it
sometimes
has
when
been.
you're in a vortex of building, that happens. So it's matured a lot, and it was certainly different back then. But I think the biggest opportunity that, your common host, owner, property manager, hotel owner has is to dial in what's right in front of them. People I see a lot of times looking in the wrong places. They could be spending money on Facebook. They could, maybe be thinking that they need to start an Instagram, and you look at the marketing of their existing product as well as the way that they're going about their strategy as it relates to pricing. And you're like, you're looking in the wrong place. Sometimes it's right in front of you, but hopefully this conversation can help, your listeners at least bring awareness to places that they should be looking and things that they should be thinking about, because it is something that is holistic. Usually it's not one thing, but sometimes it is one thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have a conference. Actually, by the time this comes out, the conference will be either done or gone. But we've got a conference and we've got a session which is actually titled almost identical to what you came up with before the episode. You said, "How do you add 20% to your bottom line?" And they said the 25% is what they managed to achieve by really sitting down
People
and
like to be a
thinking.
little fluffy.
Yeah, by thinking about how to do it. I don't think this was we've just doing things. This was actually strategy sessions, sitting down. What are we going to do this year differently to what we did last year to improve our margin and really put a strategy behind getting that extra revenue? And like you said, there's different levers that you can pull. Now, what percentage of property managers would you say aren't getting this right at the moment or aren't even thinking about it?
99%.
Wow. What makes you say that?
Because we talk to hundreds per week and we see the common mistakes that they make all across the board. So, 20% is a very realistic number. Maybe some people, they truly are dialed in, but they are the 1%. But, even 5-10% to the bottom line on any business, right? You do talk about $100,000 business, that's relatively small, but that's still an extra 10K a year. People would probably like to figure that out, right? And there's people that double their revenue. So 20 is kind of like a very realistic range, but I would say, yeah, 99% of hosts, property managers, boutique hotels that I speak to, um, just by nature of what I do, as a consultant and revenue manager, are absolutely leaving money on the table, and it's right in front of them.
Beautiful. Okay, so break it down for me. We've got a listener of the podcast who's listening to this saying, I'm hearing you. I want to know how to increase revenue by 20%. What are the first steps people need to take in terms of action to increase their revenue?
So, assuming that your business is positioned well on the extranets, like the big ones, right? So Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, possibly Google Vacation Rentals, and hopefully you have a direct booking website. That's step number one. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to be on all of them. I think that I speak with many that are just on Airbnb, and I think that that's totally fine. The first pitfall of the person who is maybe only on Airbnb and not performing well is they believe that by going to another extranet, that's going to solve their problem. Oh, let's go get on Booking.com. Let's go get on VRBO. I call it VRBO, by the way, because in 2012, that's what we called it. Now people call it Verbo. So, that's a little OG check right there. Call it VRBO.
Fun fact for you, depending on where you are in the world, it changes brand altogether. Over here, it stays, and all over the world. So it is a different brand. So that's something you might not have known.
Part of the evolution. So, with that said, assuming that your base foundation is pretty set, I think the two most obvious places to look at to determine whether or not you are leaking revenue is going to be on how your listings are positioned and what their listing presence is. It's speaking a language to the world. It's communicating through photos and through copy. There's strategy points on the listing. And then you have your pricing, which by now I would say, especially, smarter hosts, they are experimenting with pricing software. Some of them were experimenting with pricing software years ago. We both know Anurag well. I've been using Price Labs myself for many years, but pricing software is far from perfect, and it really requires human oversight of that strategy. So the second place next to the listing would be the existing pricing strategy. And a lot of hosts go wrong with the setup itself because they kind of trust what softwares like Price Labs or Wheelhouse or Beyond, which are amazing. And I believe that they are necessary, but they're too trustworthy with the data, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of variance and nuance here. And step one is dial in both of those things so we can get into
Gotcha.
it.
That makes complete sense. So looking at the pricing and then look how you appear visually to your audience as you're talking to them. Let's break those two down.
Yeah.
We'll go to pricing second. So let's start off with optimizing that kind of listing itself, and let's break it down to really obvious things that people need to look at. This is a bit of a refresher. What do people need to really think about when they're building their listings?
Well, I think, when it comes to strengthening the marketing efforts of your existing listings, it's important to take a view where you kind of zoom out. Go analyze how you book an Airbnb or a hotel for yourself, right? So it starts with an actual search for a specific market that you might be traveling for. And of course, your potential bookers are doing the same thing. So when we search a specific market on Airbnb, Airbnb displays basically three things: a header photo, a headline, and the price. Now you click a bunch of filters, right? Of course, I want a jacuzzi, I want to be beachfront, whatever it is. But if you miss on one of those three variables, you just miss an opportunity to potentially drive a booking. So I think it starts with the very obvious. And, my belief, right? You see a lot of companies out there claiming that they do listing optimization. What does that even mean? Right? It's a very broad word. And I believe that different people are going to have a different response. I think I can share what it means to me. But what I do believe is that listing optimization is very much, probably 90%, a one-time thing. One of the biggest problems that I see with hosts is they're constantly changing. They're changing my header photo, changing my script, changing my title, right? And mind you, yes, sometimes you see bookings come in from those changes. But what if you just made a strategically good change and then you changed it to something that was inferior, right? A header photo.
So Evan, how do you know if you've done a good job of it?
I think number one, you need to give it time. You need to be patient. And I understand why people would not be patient because they got bills to pay and they want to drive bookings. But I think that if we take a step back and just use common sense, we can be confident in the decisions that we make. So let's just talk about a header photo. I mean, for one, if you don't have professional photos, that probably means that you're not really conveying trust. What 5-star hotel or 4-star at that, has photos that are taken with an iPhone? Mind you, if you're an amazing photographer, it's not about the type of camera, but like, let's have basic common sense when it comes to strong marketing with respect to photos. Photos are not about what people see. It's actually the way that it makes them feel, because feeling is what drives the emotional decision for somebody to actually make the booking. So step number one is let's make sure you're dialed in with the photos, but to even take a step back, your design, right? What makes you unique? What makes you different? The little things, whether it's the florals or the books on the counter in the kitchen or putting your coffee maker on the counter, let's make sure that we're dialed in so that when we get photos, right, we feel good about them. And now the strategy around ordering them and what their purpose is comes into play.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel that in the past 4 or 5 years, the quality of the listings has risen dramatically, particularly with the advent of AI. Because for a lot of people that aren't copywriters, it's a lot easier to actually get something which is plausible, possible, that then they can work on and that sort of thing. Same with the pictures. If you actually look on the OTAs from a short-term rental perspective, the standard, especially with the bigger operators, it's standardized, if for lack of a better way of putting it. When I go traveling, so then I go to countries that may be a bit poorer, then the listings start to fall apart and you don't kind of see that. So they're kind of still catching up and need the training and how do we do it? And maybe not have access to the same sort of equipment, but also knowledge, I think, is one of the biggest ones. I feel they're constantly changing isn't useful, but also really understanding how your listing is performing is important. One of the tips that I would have is to keep in checking. So you do searches for your area or for your property with the same query. So from whatever day, make some changes, see how it performs after a week or two. If it changes, it goes up and down. There are many things that affects algorithms on an OTA. But most often it's down to how conversion. So the OTAs don't really care about what the words are and stuff like that. They want to make sure that it's converting correctly. And if they can see higher conversion rates, it means that the guest who's looking is getting a better experience, because the guest who's looking wants to get booked as quick as they possibly can, right? Without having to go through all the properties, all the different steps. If I could say, hey, find me a place in this area, and they didn't have to choose, but they knew exactly which one I wanted and which one was the best deal, the best for me, that would be the best outcome for me. I don't want to look through, like, honestly, like, if it's nice, it's good. I'm not looking on choice. I'm looking on whatever is going to be the best for me, but it needs to know what's best for me. So anyway, they're optimizing for conversion, right? So that's what you're trying to do as an operator, is making sure that you're helping the conversion rates by having a listing that makes sense, that's legible, that has the right information, the right details, and is displayed in such a way which is encouraging for the user or the guests to book all the way through.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. And there's really valuable and important things that we need to unpack. So to complete my point about photos, your header photo is what needs to stop someone's scroll, right? It needs to grab their attention. From what I know, blue skies, sunsets, facing the outdoors, those are the three. I mean, there's a lot to it. At least do that. How many hosts do you see that have these muggy day shots? Like, what are you doing, right? That's not going to, why would you do that?
Or if you're in a very competitive market, what you can do as well is you can put in a photo which stands out, right? So if everybody's got the same blue sky, because there's 50 of you, what do? You have a blue sky or whatever, but then you put in something which is yellow or pink or something which is bright, which draws their attention into your particular property, right? Because if it's all just beige and white and that sort of stuff, it's then what are you going to do to sort of make them click?
I mean, I'm a big believer in being different, right? But there's a fine line, right? Some people, if you are a designer, right, then maybe highlighting your interior, or you hired an interior designer, maybe that's a great example where you have an interior shot because you're proud of your design and that's what makes you different. But just being different for the sake of, oh, well, everyone has a pool in a backyard, so why don't I put my IKEA couch? I'm not clicking on your IKEA couch. I don't mind if you have an IKEA couch. That's where you need to focus on what is the best photo to drive the click. And sometimes that is the outdoors. Sometimes it is like everything else, right? Maybe that's where your price and maybe your top four and all that matter. But you brought up a point, Bart, about Airbnb no longer cares what your headline says and what your, script says, right? And I believe that to be true, because what does Airbnb really care about? They care about money. They're a $50 billion business or more. So, with that said, humans care about what you say. So if we talk about how do you differentiate with your script, with your title, I always tell people, hey, you're in Miami, right? Can you tell me the top 5 restaurants that I should eat at? I've never been to Miami. I mean, I have, but I'm just saying, a lot of people, they haven't been there. All you had to do was put your top 5, 10 favorite restaurants with a short little distance, mobile optimized, right? To show how far you are. that one decision, which will now live on your listing forever, could create the feeling within the looker that you know your market, and that if they need something, they can go after you. So this is differentiation as well. And we have to be careful with being too AI driven with respect to the way that we craft words. They are important and they can communicate a message.
It's that personalization, but not being overly personalized as well, depending on I think we go back to the marketing 101, it's understanding your target market, right? And you were talking about urban flat and you understanding your corporate target market, and that led into your decisions. Now I'm going to switch up and we're going to go over to the revenue, the pricing side of things, because we've only got 10 minutes left. So that's not long at all. And now you're going to have to give your best stuff, Evan, in terms of pricing, because one of the pieces of feedback, quite often when we think about pricing, one of the first things you do is you get a tool. Now, I don't want to speak about specific tools, but pricing tools, be it beyond the Price Labs or the myriad of Wheelhouse and the myriad of other ones. But quite often, people think of those products as being a set and forget. Oh, it's going to automate everything for me. Fantastic. The reality is yes, it can, but you still have to be in there. Tell me, what are people doing with pricing beyond getting the tool, right? Yeah. What do they have to do next to make sure they're looking at things properly and increasing that revenue?
Pricing tools are important, but they also have a lot of depth and layers to them. And, I had a thought the other day that relates to technology. We as humans, we use a lot of technology. Some people use ChatGPT every day. I use Zoho and I use Help Scout and I have Fathom, and we all use technology, right? I use Price Labs personally. That's a personal decision. But what percent of the maximum optimal way of using these softwares do most people use these softwares? 20, 30, 50% at best. When I see the average host use pricing software, they aren't even using the depth of that tool, right? So step number one is saying, how strong is my strategy? A strategy has levels to the game. Most people are at 10%. They put in a minimum, they put in a base. Here's the thing. Every season is different. Every season has a lead time. Every season has an average daily rate for your property type. You have occupancy-based models. You have demand sensitivity. You have so many layers, and people use these. And by the way, the market changes. So you could sit here and aggregate all this data to make decisions about how to strengthen your strategy, but it has to adapt over time. So step number one is get your strategy right. And that is a very deep conversation for a later time. But I think the general idea is realizing that pricing software, despite getting my endorsement, requires good strategy and certainly human oversight to keep that strategy in check, because we all know that you either overprice or you underprice, and we make these emotional decisions to try and fill bookings. Well, isn't software supposed to do that for you? And the answer is no, it's not.
Yeah. Okay. So, obviously we can't go for a full breakdown of strategy, and a lot of it's kind of depends, right, on the different businesses. But it's sort of a top level, when we're thinking about strategy for optimizing pricing, what kind of things do we start to think about?
The first thing that comes to mind is understanding the data in every month, starting with what's called the lead time. I was chatting with someone the other day who for the past 2 years has booked her New Year's on January of that year, meaning she's booking New Year's, which is one full year ahead, right? And she asked me the other day, I'm her revenue manager. She said, "Why are you pricing me at $1,000 a night? I should never be at $1,000 a night." Well, I said, look at your lead time. You got a 50-day lead time. And look what you did the last 2 years. You booked a year in advance. So everything when it comes to maximizing your revenue falls based on two variables. Are we risk on or are we risk off? Can we afford to play the game of pricing really high? If someone really wants my beach house or something, book it and pay a premium. There's far out bookers that money ain't a thing, right? They can afford it, right? You got far out bookers. You've got a middle, let's just call it the market lead time. And then you've got last minute. So you need to dial in those 3 booking windows. But it all comes down to the data, which a lot of the times the pricing tools give you. And this is how you can assess whether or not you can play the, hey, I'm going to keep my prices high, or should I be lowering them? Now, if you get outside, like for example, if the lead time in a market on average is 20 days, right? And we're sitting here or actually, let's just say the lead time is 60 days. And we're sitting here in February, and I'm trying to make a decision of what I should do for the next 20 days to get this month booked. Well, if your lead time was 60 days ago, that means that the peak booking period was in December. It's February 10th right now, and I know that this will age, but it means that I missed the window. I can't afford to jack up my prices. I need to get down to my minimum. But again, the lead time is a metric that not many hosts look at, and it's a very important metric that helps you decide, should I go up or should I go down in terms of my price?
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so data is kind of what you're saying there. Starting to look at the data, and then lead time. What other sort of key metrics? So, and by the way, folks, with the strategy, another thing to do is you could grab all your data and you could put it into a spreadsheet, pop it into one of the AI tools, and then ask it to help you to create a strategy for your business. That'll be my first port of call. Now, is it going to get it right? Maybe, maybe not. But at least it's going to start to give you some ideas on some higher level revenue management strategies and ideas that you can start to implement. And then you give Evan a call and say, hey, am I going in the right direction or not? So we look at lead time. That's really critical. What other things can people look at sort of actively in terms of really dialing in their strategy?
Yeah. So put it this way, lead time is one variable probably out of 50, right? And a good revenue manager, and what I've dedicated my life to for at least the last 5 years, is dialing in pricing, takes all of the data that exists and makes strategic decisions with that data that unfortunately pricing software cannot do for you. So other examples that are just as important, like for example, simple occupancy, right? If we are looking at bookings happening, if bookings are flying in for 6 months into the future, right? Most people don't even know what a good price is. They just say bookings, they go, okay, cool. Now, some people see bookings and they go, crap, I'm too low. I should have been higher because I was higher last year. If I have a 4-bedroom house and in the month of July, my occupancy is 50%, but other 4-bedroom houses in my market are only 20%, does that mean that I'm priced too high or am I priced too low? So that's what's called pacing, occupancy pacing. Revenue management is a forward thinking, look 12 months into the future and make sure that I'm not overpriced or underpriced. So if I'm at 50% and the market's at 20%, I'm pacing ahead of the market. Now, the lead time is important here, right? So let's just assume that the lead time was 30 days. Well, that means that I literally have I have March, April, May, June. People are booking in June for July. Therefore, if I'm pacing ahead, I should dial up the heat, raise my pricing, because we should always be pacing with the market for the most part. There's times to chase ADR. There's times to chase occupancy. But looking at your occupancy relative to the market is a good starting place that most people just don't do. Amazing. They look at their own listings and they look at previous years, and previous years have little to do with right now.
We're going to need to have a whole bunch of acronyms at the bottom of this podcast so that people can keep pace and understand what all the different terms mean. We try to keep these episodes relatively short and concise to give people some ideas for them to get going. So we're going to come towards a bit of a swift end here, Mr. Evan. Are there any final tips, top 1, 2, or 3 tips that you like to leave with people?
My number 1 tip is to never be satisfied. My number 2 tip is to constantly test. When I say satisfied, always aim for a higher level. Don't just get comfortable where you're at. There's always a better way. testing and failing, unfortunately, leaving money on the table sometimes is part of the game. Wear it, embrace it, say thank you, because you can only learn if you go through this journey, like most people are, right? It's tough. It's not easy. And number 3 is go find people out there who've been in your shoes and who maybe know a little bit more than you and pick their brain. That's it.
Amazing. I like those 3 tips, especially the last one. That's why you should come to Strive to Thrive conference in a few weeks' time. I'm going to plug it. Actually, we had some ticket sales come through the other day, and they said they were watching this, and that encouraged them to come, which is good. Now, Evan, I really appreciate your time and you coming on. And folks, if you are listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, then leave us a review. It makes a difference. Subscribe as well. That's available for you. On YouTube, really important. Subscribe, share, hit the thumbs up button. It does make a difference. It means that we can keep on doing the work that we're doing here. Evan, thank you so much. Synchronist.com is where you need to go to find out more information. If you add him on LinkedIn, Evan Haskell, he may accept your request. He hasn't with me yet, but hopefully he will after this episode. Evan, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I'll do it on the episode right now, Bart.
I appreciate your time, your energy, and hopefully we'll catch up this year.
Yes, sir. We'll do. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.